It was a quiet Tuesday morning when the chaos began. I was at my office, reviewing the quarterly reports for my business complex, when I heard a commotion outside. At first, I assumed it was just routine traffic or some contractor making deliveries. But a few minutes later, I noticed a fleet of police cars and a few security SUVs pulling into the lot. Curious, I walked to the large glass doors to see what the fuss was about. To my astonishment, several HOA representatives, led by none other than Karen, were arguing loudly with the officers. Karen had apparently called 911, claiming that I was violating HOA regulations and that my office complex was operating without proper authorization. She insisted that the HOA had authority over the property, despite the fact that I legally owned the entire complex. I stepped outside calmly, waving at the officers to pause. Karen immediately spotted me and charged forward, pointing a finger in my face. "You have no right to be operating here," she shouted. "This is under HOA oversight." I let her rant for a moment, then raised my hand and spoke evenly. "Karen, you need to understand something very important. I am the legal owner of this property. I have all the deeds, permits, and approvals required by law to operate this complex. Your HOA has absolutely no authority here." The officers looked confused, glancing between Karen, me, and the paperwork I had in hand. Karen, never one to back down, pulled out a binder she had clearly brought for this confrontation. "This says right here, HOA regulations give us oversight over all businesses within the community," she insisted, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. I shook my head and motioned for the officers to come closer. "You need to check the county records. Every square foot of this complex is under my name. The HOA cannot regulate my business operations, cannot dictate who works here, and cannot demand that I close down." At this point, one of the officers spoke up. "Ma'am, we need documentation of ownership before we can take any action. Do you have proof?" Karen smugly handed over her binder, clearly expecting it to intimidate me. I calmly produced the official deeds, county filings, and permits that not only proved my ownership, but also established my authority to manage every aspect of the property. As the officers examined the documents, Karen's confident stance began to crumble. She tried to argue further, claiming she had spoken to other HOA members who supported her. But the officers were no longer listening. Their attention was fully on the paperwork I had provided. "Ma'am," one officer said gently but firmly, "you legally own this complex. The HOA has no jurisdiction here. You are within your rights to operate as you see fit." Karen's face turned bright red with frustration. She stammered, trying to maintain her composure, but it was futile. The officers had already informed her that any further attempts to interfere with my property could result in citations for harassment, trespassing, and false reporting. With her plan foiled, Karen stormed off, muttering threats under her breath, while the rest of the HOA representatives followed silently, defeated. I made a point to speak to the officers one more time, thanking them for their professionalism and clarifying that all security measures for the complex were up to code. It was important that they knew I took both legal and public safety responsibilities seriously. By the afternoon, word of the incident had spread throughout the community. Neighbors, tenants, and local business owners all expressed relief and admiration for how I had handled the situation. Karen had not only failed to intimidate me, but she had also publicly embarrassed herself. Social media posts and neighborhood forums were filled with comments detailing her failed attempt to assert control, and it became a cautionary tale about overstepping boundaries. I returned to my office, reflecting on the events. What could have been a tense, potentially dangerous confrontation had instead reinforced my authority and showcased the importance of preparation, documentation, and staying calm under pressure. Karen had underestimated the power of legal ownership and the clarity that comes with being fully prepared. The incident also strengthened my relationships with the local authorities. By demonstrating transparency, professionalism, and legal authority, I had turned a disruptive situation into an opportunity to cement trust with the police, local regulators, and the community. Karen's interference was not just a nuisance. It was an opportunity to showcase the difference between legitimate authority and empty intimidation. By evening, the office complex was quiet again. Karen had retreated, likely plotting her next misguided attempt. But I knew that any future interference would be met with swift legal and procedural action. The HOA had learned a clear lesson. Ownership, documentation, and preparedness cannot be challenged by arrogance or ignorance. My office stood firm, fully operational, and legally protected, while Karen's credibility in the community continued to erode. The moral of the day was unmistakable. No matter how loud or persistent someone might be, the law, preparation, and calm authority always prevail. Karen had tried to bend reality to fit her narrative, but the truth of ownership and responsibility had triumphed. My complex remained secure, my reputation intact, and the HOA's reach effectively nullified.